Hello, grade sixes. I hope you are well. Today, we will be speaking about European trade routes to the east via South Africa, Bartolomeu Dias, and Vasco da Gama. This is grade 6, History, Unit 6. Okay, so as you have already learned, the Europeans were looking for trade routes to the east because goods from China and India fetched good prices in Europe. Remember, earlier this term, we looked at some of the reasons why Europeans traveled? So, overland trade was dangerous because of thieves, and if the traders were not robbed, they had to pay ridiculous amounts in tax to the Arabians. Therefore, they started looking for a sea route to the east. First, let's look at Portugal. Portugal is a country in Europe, and it has a long coastline, and the Portuguese therefore took the lead in discovering a route to the east. The King of Portugal had a son named Prince Henry, who was very interested in exploration. He later became known as the Navigator. You see, his ideal was to get gold from Africa and spices from the Indian Ocean islands. It was Prince Henry's dream to find a sea route around Africa to the east, but unfortunately he died before his dream came true. The Portuguese started discovering other coastlines bit by bit, and in this way Portuguese seafarer Bartolomeu Dias discovered the Cape. The Portuguese seafarers sailed a bit further away from the coast of Africa, and eventually Vasco da Gama found the way around Africa to India in 1498. Let's talk about Bartolomeu Dias. Bartolomeu Dias meets the Khoikhoi. Bartolomeu Dias was a Portuguese seafarer who, in 1488, became the first European to sail around the southern tip of Africa. He sailed along the west coast of Africa. His sailing ship veered so far south as a result of the wind and stormy sea conditions that he missed the tip of Africa and stopped in Mossel Bay in 1488. Diaz and his crew were so happy to reach land that they decided to go ashore for fresh food and water. It was the first time the Sun and Khoikhoi saw white people, because they were the first Europeans to go ashore in South Africa. The crew was so thirsty that they headed straight to a stream for water. The Sun and Khoikhoi thought the strangers were threatening their water supply and were immediately hostile towards them. The Sun and Khoikhoi were not happy with the strangers in their country and threw rocks at them. The Europeans spoke a language they did not understand, and only after Diaz shot a herdsman with his crossbow did they leave the Europeans alone. Diaz's journey did not go past Mossel Bay, and his ships turned back because his crew were tired. On the way back, he named the southernmost tip of Africa the Cape of Good Hope. Although Diaz never reached India, he did prove that it was possible to find a trade route to the east. Now let's take a look at Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama's voyage. Da Gama and his crew departed from Portugal in 1497 in search of a sea route to the east. They sailed past the point Diaz discovered and entered waters no European had sailed before. The Europeans knew nothing about the interior of Africa. Da Gama and his crew went ashore around Christmas time. They wanted to replenish their food and water supply before sailing onwards. Da Gama named the place they stopped at Natal, a Portuguese word meaning birth of Christ. When they had loaded enough supplies, the caravels left Natal and sailed further north to the coast of East Africa. They were surprised to see Arabians in the harbour. The Arabians were trading with African traders, and the Portuguese were excited when they realized that they even traded in gold. The Portuguese did not have a lot of goods that they could trade for fresh food and water, and the African traders were not really interested in doing business with them. They only traded with the Swahili traders, who regarded the Portuguese as a threat. Luckily, da Gama was able to get a navigator to show them the way to India. The navigator was one of the most famous Arabian navigators of his time. He prided himself on knowing the Indian Ocean better than anybody else. He took the Portuguese to India. After his journey, da Gama received a hero's welcome in Portugal for two reasons. One, he discovered a sea route to the east, and more specifically to India. And he discovered that there was gold in the eastern parts of Africa. Now, let's take a look at the Dutch East India Company. The Netherlands became a rich and powerful country in the 17th century. Some people refer to Holland when talking about the Netherlands, but Holland refers to only two provinces, Noord-Holland and Zuid-Holland, in the Netherlands. A group of wealthy people in the Netherlands established a trading company called the Dutch East India Company. The company is most commonly referred to as the VOC, the acronym from the company's original Dutch name, the Verenigde Oostenrijkse Campaign. The Netherlands competed with Portugal for control of the sea routes they discovered. The VOC wanted their ships to sail around Africa to buy spices in the east, take back the spices to the Netherlands, and sell it at a profit to the rest of Europe. The Portuguese, however, controlled the trade route by establishing trade posts all along the coast of Africa. The VOC ships started attacking the posts and slowly but surely took control of the sea route to the east. The sailors who worked on the VOC ships were usually very poor Dutchmen who could not find any other work. Life on the VOC ship was not easy for a sailor because they were away from their families for long periods of time. They had to live and sleep on the ship's open deck regardless of the weather. They had no protection against the cold and the rain, or the sun for that matter. Regardless of the weather, they could not sleep a lot because there was always work to be done. They did not get enough fresh food and water, resulting in many sailors dying from scurvy, a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. Scurvy affects the gums, and many sailors lost their teeth. Also, groups of about 7 sailors ate out of one bowl. The life of a sailor on the VOC ships is very important for you to know and very important for you to remember. And this then brings us at the end of Unit 6 in History.